I am now live for the first time ever on TikTok. So we're going to see how it goes, because I don't even know how this works or how quickly people will jump on here. But I've done them on Instagram before loads of times, and so I'm just on here now, and I'm just going to start chatting and going with it, and we'll see where we go. I thought it'd be good to do my first ever TikTok live, bearing in mind that I've had TikTok for like 2 weeks now, and I've grown my profile to like 50,000 followers in a couple of weeks. So I just thought it'd be good to jump on. I don't even know when I finish this how I stop it, but I'm here. So what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to do a bit of an intro to myself, talk a little bit about who I am, the work that I do, with a bit of a focus on trauma, because I think a lot of the work that I do centers around that. Now, who I am as a person and the work that I do, I work with individuals and organizations basically around the world, helping them to develop what I would call emotional resilience. Now, emotional resilience being different to what a lot of people think it is. People think that resilience is the ability to keep going, when actually I believe it's much more about our ability to come back to ourselves and understand ourselves on a deeper level to make sure that we get our needs met. And I do that work. Within the corporate environment. So I've worked all over the world with a number of different corporate environments, and I go into schools as well. So I've worked with children as young as 5 and 6 years old, helping them as well to understand their emotions on a bit of a deeper level. And the one thing that I know to be true, or the one thing that I believe to be true, I shouldn't say that I know it to be true, but the one thing that I believe to be true is that so much or nearly all of people's suffering, all's unfair. A lot of the people suffering and a lot of the things that people struggle with can be traced back to the same thing. Whether I'm working with like big investment bankers or whether I'm working with people that are trying to get off of alcohol and drugs, the core wound I believe to be the same, which is, am I enough? And then how that plays out in our life. And we normally tend to become different versions of ourselves in order to try and feel like we are enough, or to prevent the pain of feeling like we're not enough. And I think that's the same with everybody. And I've just seen here, somebody said, I watched your video you made about horrible parents. It was the validation that I needed. This is the thing that I think about toxic parents, and it's one of the most difficult conversations. If I look at the most heat that I get when online, it's when I do a video talking about being able to cut toxic parents out of your life. And I think a lot of people struggle with it because it's almost impossible for them to comprehend what it's like to live with a parent who is just wholly emotionally abusive all of the time. People don't understand emotional abuse. In fact, people don't understand abuse in general. We've created a world where people are kind of scared that people in the big bad world out there that you don't know might abuse you or might abuse children. And of course that could happen, but children are way, way, way more likely to be abused by somebody that they know and somebody that they trust. And so when you understand that, right, you start to recognize that if people have experienced abuse, then it's very likely to have been from a parent. And emotional abuse is wholly misunderstood. It's wholly misunderstood, particularly when it's from parents. Let me start by saying, because I think it's important to say this, I understand that a lot of parents do their best, right? I think that's probably true in most cases. And I also recognize that in a lot of cases, the best isn't good enough. And the amount of times that I hear people say to me, you shouldn't talk about people cutting toxic parents out of their life because their toxic parents probably experienced a level of abuse and that's why they're like they are. Now, that might be true. That probably is true in most cases. But who gets to draw the line on that? Right? Where does that stop? You could say the same, everybody that does bad things to other people, or a lot of them, I mean, I do think evil people exist, but that's a whole other discussion. But everybody that does bad things to other people, right, probably has a story of why they do it. That does not justify it. That does not justify it. And here's the big difference. There's a difference between a parent who struggled with their own stuff. I'm one of them parents, by the way. I'm one of them parents who has not been good enough for my children at various stages in their life. I can still not be good enough for my children. I can still understand, even now in my life today, with all the work that I've done on myself, my children would have a valid point to say, my best at any given moment is not good enough. That is different. That is different to emotionally abusive parents, often who are narcissistic at their core and have a complete inability to self-reflect on that and to at least be working towards trying to be better as a parent. And I think when I'm talking about the emotional abuse, I'm talking about the breadcrumbing, where the parent gives you just enough to make you think, okay, they love me, because everybody wants to be loved by their parents, right? That's not a desire, that's a biological need, right? That's what happens to us when we're when we're children. We biologically need to attach to them. So there's always this painful desire to attach to somebody who's nothing but horrible to you. And in the end, you reach adulthood and you realize, or a lot of these people realize, my only chance at any kind of freedom in my own well-being in my own life is to cut my parents out. And it is fucking wholly wrong that they exist in a society that when they find the power to do that, society says you only get one mum and dad. Can you imagine any other form of abuse where if you told somebody that you'd freed yourself from that abuse, that person would say, well, that's a bit unfair. It doesn't happen anywhere else. And so there's this weird space where with parents, and that's why I think it's vitally, vitally important to talk about it. Let me read some of these comments here. The more you do for kids, the more they want. I don't know, maybe that's a throwaway comment. It's probably, I've got 6 children, and that's probably true. And I will always be trying to do more for them anyway. I wanted to say how grateful I am for you and your content. You're amazing. Oh, thank you. It's bad for your brain to tell ourselves, oh, it's okay, they're abused, so I'll allow it. It's like, I think the world needs more love and compassion for a lot of people and the ways in which they show up to the world. I think a lot of people that do bad things are not bad people. They just do bad things, and it's normally rooted in pain. And let me be very clear about this, because this is also true, and both can be true. Having experienced any level of trauma or abuse is not an excuse to go on and abuse other people. Now, it might be a reason, but it ain't an excuse. And we as people have to be really, really clear, particularly when you have a level of codependency in you, if you're like me, right, who wants everybody to love me, even if I hate them, I want them to love me, right? I have to learn, nah. I can have love and compassion, and I can recognize this is not good for me, and I'm not going to accept it. That's what boundaries sometimes might sound like. But then there is another degree as well, and there's a degree where there's just horrible people, and I don't care. I don't care what life you've had. You don't get to treat people like that. Yeah? And I say that as somebody who has treated people badly at large periods in my life as a result of the ways that I feel. That doesn't make it okay, and there'll be consequences. There are people that it would be nice for me to still have in my life today that are not in my life today as a direct result of the things that I've done. And I have to accept that, right? And everybody has to accept that. So we have to have boundaries, right? And we can do that and have love and compassion. A lot of people don't want to heal. I find that a lot of people stall when they get towards wanting to heal. One of the biggest things that stalls them is because they're terrified of who they will be without the personality that they've built as a result of the trauma that they've experienced. Now, you can overcome that. There is, if you actually get into the healing work, what you find is that you can learn to love all of your parts of yourself. And what you start to realize is that even in the past, when you did things that hurt those around you or hurt yourself, they were nearly always rooted in parts of you that loved you enough to try and protect you. So when I started drinking, for example, and using drink and drugs in the way that I did, I wasn't just an idiot who was reckless, right? There was a part of me that was looking for a solution. And when I used alcohol and drugs, I found a solution in them. And the same was true for a lot of my behaviors. The healing work for me is to see myself in all of those experiences and ask myself, can I love myself yourself in those moments. And I think it's possible, but you have to do a lot of work. It's very, it's easier, I believe, to love yourself in the moments when you're doing well, but recognize how hard it is to love yourself when you've just done something that you wish that you didn't. And I think one of the things that I struggle with online, when I look online, and I think social media in general, you know, I've used particularly Instagram, and I'm sort of new on TikTok, but I've used Instagram for a long time. One of the things that that worries me a little bit when you look online is there's good, well-meaning people that are trying to promote healing and make it accessible. And so they want to show you the positive impact that it's had on their life. But what ends up happening is you watch all this stuff and you think, I'm working on myself, you know, I'm doing all of these things, and I still struggle with X, Y, and Z, right? And I got to tell you, I've been working at this stuff for over 10 years, actively, every day, addictively in some instances, right? And I can tell you that at any given moment, I still struggle desperately with the ways that I feel. I still do things that I wish that I didn't, right? I still do things that I wouldn't want to stand up in court and try and justify to a judge or to a jury, right? Because I'm a human being. I feel things very deeply, have a high level of sensitivity. And so as a result of that, sometimes I can act erratically. And for me, the healing journey isn't always about stopping that and fucking never having that happen again in my life and being somebody who doesn't react in that way. Healing to me is knowing that those moments come, being my best to try and evolve into being a better person where I can, and having the ability to have love and compassion for myself in those moments. So you don't have to be somebody who's smashing it all of the time and, you know, I've laying all these boundaries and, you know, I've done all the healing work now and I just float about and nothing really impacts me. I don't know, maybe some people have reached there. I haven't. Let me keep reading these so I've fallen behind. Just 30 minutes ago, I was thinking, does Josh do live sessions? See, the universe knows. The universe knows. Do you think as the victim of narc parents, you are then unhinged to attract, you are then hinged to attracting more in your life? Look, I think that if you grow up with a narcissistic parent or an emotionally immature parent, right? Or you know, if you grow up with parents where when you were a child, you developed a sense of self based on how useful you could be for other people, right? If you grew up in an environment where your parents made you work really, really hard to be loved rather than installing in you that you are lovable just because of who you are, then I think you will grow up and there will be at least large parts of you that are going to search for that and seek comfort in relationships where you have to work really hard to be loved. And so, yes, I do think that will happen. Now, what I would caveat that by saying is that we have to be careful that we don't go into kind of victim blaming here, right? And just suggesting that anybody that's in an abusive relationship sort of is doing that to themselves by seeking out. That's not true either, right? A lot of this stuff, until we are sort of awakened to it or till we're shown that, is very subconscious. So it's not that we're picking abusive partners necessarily, but it's that parts of ourselves may feel attracted to that, and until we can be awake to that and feel supported in exploring that, then those patterns may repeat. Yeah, so I think it's important that nuanced part there is important. I wish I still had my mum and dad. You should love your family. My dad died when I was 9 years old, and I still have a mum that's very close to me. I do appreciate how people that have lost parents young may find it hard to fathom how somebody who's walked out on a parent might have to do that. But what we're talking about here is abuse. We're talking about emotionally abusive parents. And in nearly every single case of estrangement, estrangement from a parent, the person is doing it because they know they have no other choice. And in some ways they are in a kind of living grief, which I believe is very similar to the grief that I experience of somebody who's lost a dad. In some ways, you could argue it's worse, but I think comparison in this instance is pointless, not needed, and probably not useful. So maybe I shouldn't have said it. But You see what I'm saying? I think that living, because there's always a desire, and those emotionally abusive parents, you know, what they have a tendency to do is randomly pop up with a text message or a call with just enough breadcrumbs to make you think, shall I break this and go back into that relationship? And then bam, they're doing it again. They're doing it again, and they lured you in to abuse you. So I understand how if you've lost a parent, it can feel like that. But I think it's important to say that. Do I recommend any books? I'll do a different live on books, so I could go into them for ages. Trudy, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing your comments in here. The comments like, that's why your kids don't want you. I don't know how to kick you out of here, but I appreciate that this is a motive for you in some way, of someone that's lost your parents, but maybe this isn't the right space for you, and should find a space of people that are going to support you in that way. And I understand, I totally agree, and I understand that when I had my daughter, I had a traumatic childhood. Yeah, I think it's important. How do we stop that though? What are we talking about? How do we stop that pattern of getting into those relationships? Look, I think some of the really important work is to learn about all of the different parts of ourselves. Now, a really, really good place to start is to spend time noticing. And what I mean by that is noticing completely non-judgmentally. Spend time noticing how you show up to the world. So this is what I do, right? I start noticing who and what do I become in any moment. Yeah. So I might be around a group of men and I notice that I start swearing a bit more, and I might pump my chest out a little bit and start talking about fights that I never had when I was a kid, right? And I think to myself, oh, I noticed how I tried to act like a bit of a tough guy there. Why did that happen? And then I start to realize, okay, there's a part of me that when I'm around a lot of men is worried that I don't come across as being strong and tough enough. And so I resort to trying to act like that. And then there might be another occasion where I start using like my intellect and trying to pronounce all of my words properly, and you know, dropping names of books when I'm around somebody. And I might ask myself, why did I do that, right? Why did I become that version of myself, this intellectual version? And maybe in those moments, what it was is that I felt like I wasn't, you know, worthy of being in the room with these people, and so I was trying to exert my intellect on them. And so then the more that you'll do that, you'll start to see that there's all these different parts of yourself. Then you can start to realize when you enter in relationships, what am I doing here? Am I in a relationship where I'm working desperately hard in order to feel the love in which I crave? Or am I in a relationship here where the love is not unconditional, because that would be dysfunctional, right? There should always be conditions in a kind of partner relationship, right? But am I in a relationship where somebody's loving me wholly for everything that I am, within the boundaries of what a relationship would be? But we need to understand all of the parts of ourselves, I think, to be able to do that kind of work. Bro, how to be self-confident. I can't go up to a girl I like and meet. I always say that confidence and self-worth are different. I've always had high confidence, cripplingly low self-worth. So in some ways I can develop a confidence, and I do that by tapping into a part of myself that can go and act like I don't care about anything, right? When actually my self-worth is cripplingly low. I don't take any selfies and stuff like that, and I'll say, selfies are weird, why do people take them? And what I actually mean by that is, I wish I could take a selfie, but it makes me feel too awkward because I never look at a picture of myself and feel good about it. That's my cripplingly low self-worth. My confidence, to bring it back to your question, how do I find confidence? My confidence is way more about fearlessness. Fearlessness isn't the absence of fear. Fear is the feeling scared and thinking, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's what I do in most of the stuff that I do where I need to be confident. It's like jumping out of a plane. I just think, fuck it, go for it. And there's that step. And so I don't know how much that helps. And be okay with failing. Be okay with messing up, which is hard when you suffer with a lot of shame. Trauma bonds keep us there. Yeah, so I've talked a little bit about the trauma bonding stuff in what I've just said, although I might not have called it that. I show up angry, feeling worthless, weak, and have no boundaries. I would say there is a version of you that shows up angry, feeling worthless, weak, and have no boundaries. And that is a part of you, or at least it may be more than one part of you, but that is a part of you that loves you enough, right, to try and protect you from shame. So why might I feel worthless? Or why might a part of me want me to believe that I am worthless? If I listen to that part, maybe that part wants me to think that because whenever in the past, at certain moments in my life, whenever I tried to do things that made me feel worthy, I was hurt and I was shamed. That might have been at school with the bullies, or that might have been at home with the bullies, right? If those were your parents. And so like, that part of you might be existing to say, right, let's be worthless, let's stay away from that, and then we don't have to risk, because there's a lot of risk when we enter in any relationship. That's why our trauma plays out in our relationship, because we risk rejection, we risk heightened feelings of shame, all of the things that we have perhaps for a lot of our life built up walls and barriers around by developing certain parts of ourselves. I don't even think I understand boundaries anymore. I try to make some, then ignore them mostly. Yeah, look, I think with boundaries, right, boundaries has become like this really buzz thing where you see people online that are laying these absolutely brilliant boundaries, right? And I'm much better at laying boundaries now with people that I sort of don't know that well in the work that I do, for example. And I have to kind of embody a bit of my warrior energy when I do that, right? And pretend that I'm strong and just sort of cut things off. But I find boundaries really, really difficult in my loving relationships and the people that I'm seeking attachment from. Why? Because I'm wholly codependent. I desperately want to be loved. I want people to like me. And so I find it hard to lay boundaries, I find it hard to say no to people. I'd rather lie to them the next day about why I didn't come to the social event that they invited me to. And again, look, I wish people online would talk more in this way and be like, look, work on your boundaries, do your best, have compassion for yourself and try and build some and try and lay some, yeah? But let's not fucking pretend that we're all laying these absolute superb boundaries and we're going out and smashing life. And maybe these people aren't pretending. And maybe I haven't done the work well enough. And I'm being genuine there, because it's harsh for me to kind of make that judgment on other people. But I think it's a lifetime's work, man. And I think if you're working on it, then you're working on it, and power to you. Hi from Finland, hello. Confidence is ego though, right? Look, I think ego is talked about in too simplistic terms. People make out that we have our ego and one other thing, and I think it's deeper than that. Okay, let me try and pick some more of these out. Start by seeing women as human beings, not as something to be scared of. I don't know if that's aimed at me. But I'm a father, I feel like I do see women as human beings. My mum has done this to me for years, and I keep going back after the abuse. And it's natural that you would do that, right? Because you seek attachment. So when you're born, we are completely dependent on our parents, right? More dependent than most other animals actually within the whole animal kingdom. And this is because when we went up onto two legs, the women's hips narrowed, right? And so you couldn't get a fully formed brain out, right? So we have evolved where our brain does a lot of the development on the outside. Think of a horse or a cow. When it's born, it can walk straight away, right? Because it can come out and its brain's done a lot of its forming. In those initial 2 to 3 to 4 years, we are almost completely, in the initial year for certainly, we are completely dependent on our parents. So it's our biological, we're wired, our brain is built, developed, wired to attach to our parents, right? So that's why I think the water gets really muddied and people struggle to understand why you might want to cut one of them off, right? There are heroes, there are gods in those initial years, right? And so it's natural that throughout your whole life, you're always going to be seen. And of course you do. Of course you want your mum to love you. And this is what pisses me off when people, when people jump on me when I say that if you have to cut them out, you cut them out. Because I get all this crap like, oh, people are just cutting their parents out for no reason. Look, maybe they are, but I've never met one of them. I've met people who are in pain. Who are in pain because they've cut them out, but that pain is fucking marginally less than the pain of having them in their lives. But it's their only chance. Actually, I have met some people that have found complete freedom by doing it, actually. So, power to them as well, by the way. Power to them. I find it hard to believe I deserve someone good. I've been hurt so much. And again, look, I understand why there might be a part of you that tells yourself that, because it would make sense that it would want to protect you in that way, right? But we all deserve somebody good. And I think Western culture's got it quite wrong on that front, right? Because I think we should be teaching kids that their value exists because they exist, right? And actually what we teach kids when they get to 5 years old is that we say, if you don't work hard for the next 10 years, you're going to be useless. So there's some societal stuff here going on as well, right? And sort of neoliberalism society sort of teaches us that, you know, you've got to work really, really hard to find your value. Whereas actually your value exists because you exist. And I think the more that we can work on ourselves, the more that we might be able to get into relationships that support us more. We're biologically wired to want to fit into our tribe. Absolutely, that's the stuff that I've been talking about. Your content always hits me hard, even if it doesn't directly relate to me. That's amazing. Again, that's because I think we're all very similar in our things. And someone says here, how do you deal with trauma? It's a very broad question, by the way. So I don't think like the answer that I'm going to give you now is going to cut it, right? Because it's deeper than that. But what I would say is that trauma comes from the Greek word, I believe, meaning wounding, right? So we're talking about an internal wound. Firstly, I think you don't need to bring everything up necessarily, but you do need to try and find and trace what your core wound is. My core wound is, in and of myself, I am not lovable. That's my core wound. That I'm not enough. Unless I'm making people happy or working hard or abandoning myself so other people get to feel good, right? My core wound is I am not lovable. And so the work is to try and find ways to love myself in all of my parts. For me, inner child work has been massive for that. That's what I do on my Inner You program that I run. But don't make the mistake with the inner child work of just going straight to your inner child, because you're disconnected from it because it's terrified, right? And because it doesn't feel safe. And so you have to do some work building yourself up. But if we look at trauma as wounding, internal wounding, then what we need to do is tend to those wounds and find out, what those wounds might need in order to heal. Let's have a look. What else have we got here? I forgot how toxic my stepfather was, and I got a look from him when I cried over my mother's cancer. Wow. You see this is what people are dealing with. It's disgusting. I've gone low contact, and if I have to visit, I notice I go into fight or flight. Yeah, so our body goes into that kind of, our nervous system goes all over the shop. As a result of that. Why should people have to put up with this? That's what annoys me. That's what annoys me, is that someone comes along and it's like, my mum wasn't the best in the world, but she tried her best. And I'm like, well, good for you and your mum, but that's not what we're talking about here. And people always say to me, oh, maybe you should make a video about toxic kids. And I think, well, if you care a lot about that subject, you go make that video about the toxic kids. I'm talking about something that I know about. And by the way, I know about it because of the people that I've worked with, the people that I've supported in the work that I do. It's not even from personal experience, although I have some people very close to me that have parents in this way. And so sometimes social media can be a little bit like, and I've said this in previous stuff on Instagram, but social media can be a little bit like, if I did a video saying I like the color red, somebody would come on angry because why are you hating on the color blue? And I'll be like, well, no, I'm not. I just said I love red. Wow. Blue's good as well. And I think, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is. But this video is about red, right? And that's like an analogy of what I think happens online a lot. I feel every time I don't abandon myself, most people around me get very angry. There could be some work on the people that are around you. I certainly know as I began to work on myself, I outgrew a lot of people, right? Because a lot of people were in my life because I was a people pleaser, right? So when I stopped being a people pleaser, I didn't have a lot to offer people. And so I had to outgrow those people. And there's a grieving process, right? And it's not easy, because when you're outgrowing people as well, by the way, you're normally on the healing journey because you're terrified of being abandoned by people. And then you're starting, by doing the very healing work, you get abandoned by, or what feels similar to being abandoned by, everybody around you, because you're doing the work on yourself and you're starting to outgrow them, right? So that in and of itself, brings up a load of stuff. So that's why we're always working on ourselves. I started therapy a few weeks ago, and it's bringing up stuff I had pushed to the back of my memory. Yeah, but power to you, man. Power to you for doing for doing the work on yourself and for committing to do that. You know, we're in a world that needs people to do that. Just worried it's going to impact the relationship with my mum. Look, that feels like a natural fear. That feels like a natural fear. But take it a session at a time, okay? Take it a bit of work at a time. Don't allow yourself to be put off by something that's not come to pass yet. Most of what we worry about doesn't come to pass. I'm going through this outgrowing thing right now. I mean, I'm constantly going through it all the time. It's not easy. Look, I think the people that are really close to you, right? If if you do have like things like a loving family that are close to you, then, you know, in a lot of ways, sometimes you have to adjust your expectations, right? Because you don't want to drop those relationships. This is the thing about family. I think family is really important. And I do think that, you know, we should work hard to keep our family in our lives, right? But it's got to be on our terms. Right? And when we get into the realms of emotional abuse, it's different. Best therapy for trauma. Look, I think the best therapy is the therapy that you can, I think the best therapy is therapy that you can find that works for you. So it's not necessarily about the best one for a modality. But what I would say is that, body work for me is really, really important. I'm very good at talking about how I feel, but I'm also very good at avoiding how I feel by talking about it. So I talk about it without ever having to feel it. And so when I do one-to-one talking therapy, I get very good at becoming a very good little patient. Yeah. So I say all the right things and do all the right things, but never have to feel it. So things like body work, so like breath work and things that bring on physical release has been really useful for me. I'm going to do a couple more questions. My phone just rang and I need to take the call. So I'm going to do a couple more questions, and then I'll finish up. But I'll do these regularly. What are your thoughts on 12-step groups? I've been sober for over 10 years. So I'm 10 years free from alcohol and drugs. I originally went to 12-step groups for a number of years. And in those years, they saved my life. I haven't been to one for probably 3 or 4 years, but I certainly needed them in them first things. I had my first therapy session last week. I had nightmares. I'm worried about the next session. You'll be good. Power to you. Look, it's going to bring up a lot of stuff, yeah? But keep with it. Stick with it. Can you define emotional abuse? Look, there's lots of different wording that you can do to define it. But I do think that people often ask, like, that's another thing that people shout at me when I do these videos on toxic parents. How do you get to define what a toxic parent is? And I don't. At no point do I sort of really define it. I think it's in the eye of the beholder. If you feel like you're being abused, right? If you feel like what's happening is an experience of abuse, then I think you have every right to explore whether it is. So look, you can go and search it and get the I'm not a sort of medical professional and all that sort of stuff. You can go and find definitions of it. But listen, I think if it's making you feel really, really bad, so then, sorry, I didn't experience physical abuse, so people don't believe I was abused. Listen, that is what I am passionate about raising awareness of, because people think that it's one of the emotional abuse is arguably, no, I don't want to keep comparing. Emotional abuse is just as painful and harmful as any other abuse, and we need to make people understand that. What are your thoughts about people developing savior complexes when helping people in trauma? What do we mean by that? As in, like, people that start to feel like they're the savior of other people, or when people start to put people on a pedestal? Let me go and research the word and then I'll talk about it, because I don't want to pretend I can start talking about it. My dad was abusive, but not physical. Yeah. What does that say? The question behind every trauma is why to me? Yeah. And I think, that's a deep question, isn't it? If you're a child that's experienced it from someone that makes you feel safe. Peter, what was the first one I said? People starting to believe that they're the savior. I think I think it's probably common. I think I probably fell into that category when I first started doing this, which was a number of years ago. And I probably have to check myself to make sure that I'm not doing that, you know. And I get very, very uncomfortable sometimes when people say, hopefully one day I'll be, you know, as healed as you are. And I'm like, whatever you do, don't have me as the benchmark, because I'm a mess. Yeah, I'm a mess. I'm just pretty good at talking, maybe. I'd say the effects of emotional abuse have hurt me far more. And look, the effects of physical abuse and any other abuse, right, they all carry emotional abuse with them, because the fear and the threat of it coming again and all that kind of stuff. Look, I'm going to finish this one here. I'm going to go and take that call. I will be doing more of these. I've actually really, really enjoyed this. And maybe I'll figure out if I can do, because I do a lot of lives on Instagram as well. So maybe I'll figure out if I can do like a live where I'm on both of them. I don't know, use my iPad or something. I'll figure it out. I appreciate all the questions. I've really enjoyed this. And for anybody that doesn't know, my reels they're not reels, are they, on TikTok? What are they called? TikToks, I guess. My TikToks, my videos, my content, a lot of it. So over here, I film this, and then I use it as smaller, more easily digestible pieces of content. So it's always fun to do. All right, I don't even know how to get out of here, so I might just disappear. Otherwise, I'll see you very soon. I've got diamonds and stuff. I don't even know what that means. End the live. Yes, thanks everybody.